I'm Grant from Hamina. I do a lot of the Hamina bits and pieces for the Asia Pacific region, mostly from a technical perspective. And then I've also got Jerry, who's sort of backing me up today. Jerry's sort of based out of the US and does a lot of, US technical bits and pieces. You're a bit of a Swiss Army knife, Jerry. Do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, Jerriola, based out of the US. I am kind of yeah, Grant in the US side of things. So yeah, any kind of product related questions and demoing Hamina, that all falls into my plate as well as some product development stuff. Yeah, pretty much anything technical that kind of happens to be something in the US time zone is falls into my territory.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so and just so everyone knows, that they have attended the right webinar today. I mean, this is a sort of I guess a replication of a webinar that was done in the US. I think it was it yesterday, Jerry, or
Yeah,
was it still your today?
yeah.
Because it is your evening.
It
Um,
would be yesterday. Yeah,
yeah,
yep.
yesterday, right?
It was more
Um,
more than 24 hours ago.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to keep track. I think I had something in my calendar and it was about 3 a.m. or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, look, basically this was this was I think UC had sort of come up with a bit of a webinar theme, basically around Hamina, what it takes to sort of go cloud, and maybe some of the security elements that would be good to sort of maybe talk about, obviously from a Hamina perspective, but also maybe for people that are in the market for a tool like Hamina, or maybe just some sort of a cloud vendor in general. Maybe some things to sort of to look out for, maybe some benefits, things like that. Here we sort of are. Now, I do sort of forewarn that this is a UC presentation deck. I've made very small, minor edits here, so there is some pretty weird stuff in some of the slides, but maybe just sort of where we should sort of start. I mean, for those that aren't aware, Hermina did recently get our ISO 27K certification, which is it's a pretty big deal, particularly in the security world. And I think particularly from a cloud perspective, right? Because there is data that is basically being sent to Hermina's cloud, and so that might maybe trigger some concerns with certain organizations and security folks and things like that. And then we do also have our SOC 2 compliance as well. And so again being sort of on that security focus on that security side, that pretty much is like it is a big deal. And as far as I'm aware, I don't believe that anyone else that's sort of playing in our in our arena, from a tools perspective, has got those certifications, right, Jerry?
No, and I mean I think the thing that, we'll kind of talk about through here is, yeah, one, are they important? And, really more so, yes, they are important, but why they're important and why, you as a user, should be looking into that kind of stuff and verifying, before you start putting stuff into somebody's cloud, making sure that they've done their due diligence to make sure that they have your kind of best interests in mind. And we'll get into some of the details of what all that means. But yeah, thought this might be a little change of pace from our usual webinars of, very RF and Wi-Fi and network kind of focus to, some other things that we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis of our jobs in this space these days.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was absolutely. So, and we'll get to some of those bits and pieces, but like in true UC fashion, we've got a nice grainy photo here of Tommy, who's our COO, and he was pretty. My understanding is he was pretty sort of forward thinking with wanting to get these, these certifications for Hermina, which I guess we're still classing ourselves as a startup, even all these years later. But often for a startup, that's can be seen as a little bit unusual. But that was something that he definitely sort of really wanted to sort of pursue, and was really sort of driving a fair bit of that, as well as a lot of other certain security architects and whatnot in the team sort of behind the scenes. And I guess the point of this slide was this was Tommy when he started the ISO 27K and the SOC 2 process. And afterwards I think he looked a little bit wearier, maybe a couple of grays in there
I
as
think I
well.
think part of it is that this was not like a week-long process either, right? This was a pretty lengthy process as part of, I
Yeah.
think what this picture is supposed to represent is, this was not a over the night like, oh, we'll just apply for this certification and get that granted and move on. There was a lot of changes that had to be implemented and a lot of auditing and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a time-consuming process and it was a very yeah, I think at least for Tommy, it was a bit stressful and making sure that we achieve those.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do
And I
want to
mean,
say though, like when I heard that we were starting to pursue, so we pursued the SOC2. Um, One, I learned through this process of actually preparing for this webinar, I was actually saying things wrong. The SOC2 is not a certification.
right.
So if we want to get technical here,
We
SO,
should.
the ISO 2701 is a certification or results in a certification. Like that's what you kind of achieve. That's, you've made it when you've gotten that certification. SOC2 is actually an audit and that produces a report, but they don't call it a certification, which I don't know, why they chose to do it that way or what. I don't know what exactly, the difference is there, other than they don't technically call it. You can't have an SOC2 type 2 certification. Um, but the report is the main thing that you get out of the SOC2 type 2 audit. And that report proves that you are meeting all these guidelines and yeah, the auditing that takes place as part of that, of how you're handling customer data and everything. So still just as valuable, but just wanted to kind of clarify that for the folks listening.
Yeah, look, I think that's a good point. Particularly when we're talking about these, these different reports and certifications. I mean, I guess if I'm ever talking to a customer, and we do get to that security side of it. I mean, the nice thing that I think certain members of our team behind the scenes have sort of put together. It actually is the security page, which is literally on the Hermina website, right? So if you just go to Hermina.com and you scroll right down the bottom, there actually is a dedicated security page there. You can sort of click on that. And then there is sort of a bit of a high level, I would say, sort of overview. And then we've also got like a trust center. And, this is maybe where, the security folks, within a certain organization, they want to do their due diligence. Is a Hermina, a company where we want to be, uploading our floor plans to and, having our Wi-Fi survey data, in their cloud. And, they can click on that. And then basically, my understanding is you can actually, you can fill out a form and you can actually
Yeah,
get that SOC 2 report that you were referring to, Jerry, which is,
yeah.
I think is pretty neat.
I think that's actually very critical, and that's what I've actually learned with working with our customers is how critical it was. When we first started to pursue that SOC2 type 2 report and audit, I was like, I wasn't familiar with it. I never heard of it before. I'm like, I don't know why we're doing this. Seems like a waste of kind of time and effort. And boy, was I wrong in that sense of like how much our customers appreciate us having this SOC2 type 2 report for their benefit of like getting this tool approved, right? And that's like the day and age that we live in now is we have all these cloud applications at our disposal, but you've got all your security teams that have to do all their checks and balances to approve these kind of tools for use before you start uploading your, floor plans and your data and things like that uh, to these tools. And just by having that SOC2 type 2 report, it's like it alleviates so much extra work that would normally have to go into this to get that kind of approval. And usually that work is on the burden of like the engineer that's trying to use that tool, right? The
Yeah.
security team's going to be like, okay, you got to fill out this, 100 questionnaire, this questionnaire with like 100 different questions on there, to make sure that like there isn't any red flags there of like, our data being exposed or something. But by having these kind of reports that you can just download, request and download right through this trust center, bypasses all of that. So it's been a game changer for us. Like it was a ton of work and effort for us to get these in place, get this whole trust center built. But man, it's made life so much easier for our users to then be able to use a tool like Hamina. And yeah, like we we're saying, I mean, the purpose of this webinar isn't just to like try and say, look how great we are, but these are the kind of things that, you should be looking for if you are, working with any kind of cloud-based tools, is looking for something like this. Are they transparent with you about these kind of audits that are taking place? One, are they having these audits done? And two, are they making that data accessible to you? Are they only providing like a redacted report, or is it like a full report? Those kind of things are also a little, bit of a gray area. So we try to be as transparent as possible, make that information available to those folks that need to see this kind of information.
Yeah, no, I just agree with that. I mean, the interactions that I have had directly with, different, security folks at different orgs, once I've directed them to to the trust center, yeah, generally, because I have seen those, those Excel spreadsheet, 100 questionnaire type of, situations. They can get access to the data that they need to basically, check off their own list, and then sort of move forward, which has been, yeah, huge time saver. And yeah, it does make things a lot smoother between, Hamina and, whatever that other, company is.
Yeah, it's almost like the conversations I've had. I feel like there's like a breath of fresh air, where like they're like, all right, here's another cloud application. We're gonna have to go through all these hoops to get this approved, and then it's like, oh, you've got a SOC2 type 2 report. Like, oh, this is gonna be a breeze to get you
Yeah.
guys onboarded now, or at least
Yeah.
cut through most of the red tape and stuff to get this. It's like, okay, you've already done all the hard work for us. Now we can kind of move past all those hoops at least.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. So we'll keep moving on through the deck. I mean, and again, this is a UC deck. Let me just preface that again. This picture of Tommy on the right. I mean, yes, he's gone through and sort of got these reports and compliances, but it could also just be that he's in a room with Dan, and there's some really strange sort of Nick Cage. Um, um, I don't know. Is it pajamas? Is it Hermina swag? I don't really know what it is, but if anyone
Analyze
that
it.
knows Yusi, he does have a bit of an unhealthy obsession with Nicolas Cage, and there's
No,
there's
if
proof
it's a
of that.
UC slide deck, it's gonna have Nicolas Cage in there somewhere. Don't overthink it. Don't overanalyze it. Just move on.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. We should probably just move on before everyone leaves the webinar and unsubscribes from their Hermina. Um, all right, so let's before we get into some of the some of the the SOC 2, the ISO bits and pieces, a couple of things that are new at Hermina. So we had in here product shows, etc., etc. Now, I just threw together a couple of things because, for me and Terry, I often have to go through the release notes to see like what is the newest stuff because, we do have a test instance that we play around with in quite a lot. And so there's some things in there that, may not have hit production yet. So I just want to make sure that, we're not talking about things that, that people maybe on the webinar today can't go and play with themselves like right now. So, I went through and I just sort of picked out, some of the bigger, I guess, bits and pieces in there. Namely the orb integration, that we've sort of recently introduced, which I think is which is a pretty nice thing, pretty big, sort of big deal there. We had the survey inspect tool, that's sort of recently been added. So, people that are out there, doing site surveys, have a play around with that. You can get a little bit more sort of information, in your, I guess, post-survey data review, and maybe we can show some of the people on the webinar what that looks like in a little bit, Jerry. Um, the NXT 2000. So I've actually got one of those on my desk here. Little, yeah, Jerry's got one there too. Um,
Course.
really neat, spectrum analyzer, tri-band spectrum analyzer from NetAlly, that is now, integrated and working really nicely with the Nomad. So Jerry's holding his up there.
Mhm.
I've actually got just a like an adapter cable on the way, so I can sort of loop it in to the, to my, like sort of, I guess, chest height sort of
Yeah.
thing, which is pretty neat. Um, I think the neat thing there is that, you've got this, you've got this Nomad device, the hardware unit, but then the NXT 2000 is this sort of optional thing. If you want to go down and, have the path of, spectrum analysis, real-time spectrum analysis, when you're using the Nomad, you've got that option there. Otherwise, you can just use the Nomad as is. And it's still pretty neat, even without the spectrum analyzer. So it's, I guess it fits in with our modular sort of licensing where you've got this on-site license, you've got a planner license. You don't need both, depending on what maybe your workflows are,
Yeah.
as well. Um,
Well, what's also really cool about the NetAlly NXT 2000, I mean, one, this is a really fast, high resolution tri-band spectrum analyzer, but that also supports things like a directional antenna. You can plug in like an external directional antenna. So if you want to locate, like, help you locate where the source of like that signal's coming from. But then in addition to that, what's kind of unique with it is it works with multiple platforms. So not only does it work with humming on the Nomad, but it also works with like your air check, like handheld devices. And I just saw today Wi-Fi Explorer. You saw that?
yeah,
What
yeah.
did you see on that?
I think I saw you. I think you'd reposted it, or you'd
Liked
liked
it
it
or
or
something?
something
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. So yeah, that's pretty neat. So yeah, like, Wi-Fi Explorer, is a third-party application, made by Adrian Granados, and yeah, it's, if you're a Wi-Fi professional, it's probably something you would want to have in your toolkit. I think it's just pretty neat that there is support, for this, a very, small but highly portable but very fast spectrum analyzer that's, now supports a bit of an ecosystem of hardware and software, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, so my point with that is that, yeah, you invest in like one spectrum analyzer hardware like this, and you can use it in all sorts of different scenarios to help you with troubleshooting and validation. And if you need to, leave it behind on something or anything, it's very versatile in that sense. And yeah, you invest in the hardware and then you can use it, in all different, multiple different kinds of applications.
Yeah. And then, obviously, we do a production push on Hamina Network Planner weekly, at the moment. So, like, there is just tons and tons of stuff. I mean, Joel has a pretty hard time, I think, keeping up on the release notes, which he does a great job with. So I just, heaps of smaller improvements, features, bug fixes, APs, and antennas. Is there anything other, like, pretty big things that we've implemented that I've missed there, Jerry? I mean, there's
Uh,
always
Well,
stuff.
you get the survey inspector, which is technically the survey explorer now. That's in the latest update, we relabeled that as survey explorer. But yeah, that's a big, I think in general, like there's been a lot of focus from the development efforts on like enhancing the site survey side of the tool. and the live integration with all the vendor integration type stuff. So yeah, there's been a lot of big leaps on
Yeah.
survey as well as on live.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably be able to show some of that. We're going okay for time. We'll zip through some of these slides. The other thing, at least in my neck of the woods, and for the folks who are on the call, except for Jerry, well, Jerry, just cover your ears for this one. We're going to be at Cisco Live next week in Melbourne. We're going to be at booth B4, which is I think that's actually like a pretty neat booth. I actually recreated. Where are we? Here we go. So if you look at World of Solutions here, we got the Hamina booth right there. So if you come in through door two, you'll see the Hamina guys there. And look, I've even put some like probably not proportionally built stools, like they look like the tallest stools ever. But yeah, we will be at booth B4. So please, if you're at Cisco Live, come check us out. Yeah, if you don't want to talk to me, you can talk to Joel or Dan. And then we also have got a an evening event on the first night of Cisco Live. And so this isn't just exclusive to people that are only at Cisco Live. If you just happen to be in Melbourne on the evening of the 10th at 7 p.m., we've got an evening event, and I think I've got the invite here somewhere, yeah, the landing page here. So basically, if anyone's ever been to to Cisco Live or the Melbourne Convention Centre, the Boat Builders Yard is, pretty much it's a short walk, maybe a 2 to 5 minute walk from the convention centre, depending on where you are. We're going to be there, so please, if you want, fill out the registration form so we know how many people are going to be there. So we've got food and drink and stuff like that. Come and say hi, and we'll have a bit of a, I guess, a Wi-Fi nerd out is probably what it's mostly going to be about. But yeah, good opportunity to have a casual, networking event. Um, Otherwise, Jerry, you were sort of saying at the top, next week you're at WLPC Mexico.
Yep. Yep, that's where I'm going next. I was just in Vegas a couple weeks ago at the Calix Connections event. Yeah, got a few trips planned before the end of the year here. I think actually I'll be at AWS. I'll be back in Vegas for AWS reInvent. Just more attending. We don't have a booth or anything there, but yeah, I wanted to check out that conference because it's a really big one.
Yeah.
Not our usual scene, but yeah, I wanted to attend that one, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, nice. And then, yeah, maybe just, the only other thing is we will be at, there'll be a bunch of us at WLPC Phoenix in the February. So I know, there often is a handful of people from APAC, Australia, New Zealand that do attend WLPC Phoenix. It's a pretty directish flight for most versus Prague. So if you're going, please come and say hi. I think you'll be there. UC will be there. I think a couple of other people
Hmm.
will be there. I might be there. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, we should have
Um,
a good group there.
all right. So let's sort of move along, and maybe again, this is coming from UC. I mean, there was a couple of people that thought he was a little bit crazy. Maybe back in 2021, um,
Yeah.
when he was sort of thinking about having this this new Wi-Fi tool that sort of obviously turned out to be Hamina Network Planner. And I could sort of imagine that, right? Because you've got these sort of, I guess, legacy, maybe seen as like incumbent tools that have sort of been in the market for many, many years. How do you sort of, I guess, how do you reinvent that, in so many ways? Um, and so, I thought I'd show these slides through where if you are using like mobile apps for site surveys, you're probably going to be using cloud, and I think that that's particularly important to highlight for if you're doing site surveys, with Hamina on site and the Nomad. You can do the surveys offline, but you are going to be using the cloud to basically sync the data. Maybe when you're back in, Wi-Fi or cellular range or whatever the case may be. if you're using, I guess, anything other than, legacy desktop tools, for site surveys, you'll be using cloud as well. And so, in a lot of cases, you're probably already using cloud, without even knowing it. And in fact, and maybe there's a little bit of bias, just with the type of customers that we talk to, Jerry. But I do find that with a lot of the customers that we are talking to, they are using, cloud instances of Wi-Fi vendors, like HPE, Juniper, Cisco Meraki, Ruckus, Extreme, stuff like that. They're already using cloud for that side of it. They're probably already using like a, G Suite or Office 365, which has got a lot of inherent built-in cloud, as well. So it does seem like, more and more people are sort of adopting it and being a little bit more okay with using cloud.
I wonder even how many people are using the cloud and don't even really realize that they're using the cloud, right? Like, really, if there's any kind of mobile application component to the suite of tools that you're using or anything, and you're using those mobile applications, you're most likely using the cloud, right? I mean, like pretty much any mobile application talks to the cloud, is synchronizing information to the cloud, things like that. So, yeah, I think a certain percentage of people may not think they're using the cloud, but actually they technically are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, and sometimes it's like, there's the difference between, like, say, data sovereignty, where I don't want to have my data, like, leaving Australian soil, for example, versus, I don't want to use the cloud. And so, often my question will be, if someone says I can't use cloud, it's like, well, do you use, like, product office productivity suites? They often do. Well, how do you email your floor plans around, or how do you send your floor plans? Oh, through email. Okay, well, that's hit the cloud. You're using the cloud, right? But again, like you said, Jerry, I think people maybe don't sort of think that they're actually, actively using it.
Yeah.
So, when I joined Hermina a couple of years ago. The tool was around before then, so I could just sort of imagine, like the thought of, we could do an all cloud Wi-Fi tool, like, does seem kind of crazy, like even today, right? But the browsing compatibility is going to be a problem. Performance isn't going to be good enough. It's not going to be able to scale, from, the small, one or two 5 AP type of situations to like a stadium, let's say. Like, it's going to be laggy. Most users are going to ask for it to be on-prem. But I think we've sort of found that that's not really the case in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, it's almost counterintuitive, right? You would think like, oh, if I need ultimate performance, I need to have like a fat desktop client that is running locally on the machine and all this kind of stuff. But it's actually the inverse is the truth, right? In the sense of if you're running it a cloud application, not only can we take advantage of all the local resources of your CPU, your RAM, your GPU, we can also leverage the unlimited resources of the cloud, right? So we can offload some of these really heavy resource tasks that maybe a laptop or a desktop isn't really fit for, and we can offload that stuff to the cloud. But then the stuff that we need, like real-time visualizations, real-time heat maps, things that we need to update very quickly, we can leverage then those local resources to do. So yeah, you can definitely do some pretty, in my opinion, like crazy stuff in the cloud as far as a cloud application goes. And yeah, going into this, I would have said, without seeing the application as it is today, like I would have said, is that really possible? Like that doesn't make sense to me. But seeing is believing, I guess, is the thing. So like if you
Yep.
haven't tried it before, I would definitely suggest trying it out. And yeah, I think, the proof is there. So yeah, it's very interesting to me. Like, I don't understand it. Like, I'm not a coder, not a programmer. In general, I would think that, yeah, you could make a desktop client and maybe in certain, if you had the perfect, where you could control everything, like, and you're only building that application for that particular hardware stack and all this kind of stuff. Maybe you can really tune it to perform really well. But I think in general, to make something that works uh, on all these different platforms, I think is the kind of critical component here. The fact that you can run it in the cloud, and that means whether the user on the other end is running that in a browser on Mac or Windows or Linux, and it still works equally as well on all of those different platforms, I think is the other kind of magical piece of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I guess, with the proofs that are being in, like, I guess, when we show the product, I think the big sort of, head exploding moment for me was, airline Wi-Fi, at least, when you travel domestically in Australia, is notoriously terrible. And I was on a domestic flight and I was able to use Hermina, and it was like it was like I was on my home, fiber connection. It was pretty incredible. And, there is a lot of the computational side that is done locally. So you don't need like this big, really big fat internet pipe to be running, an application like Hermina, which is really neat. And then I guess, on the other side of that, if you have to do a survey and you're at a site that's got zero internet, like zero backhaul at all, you can just do everything. It just saves on device, and then you sync it later. So it's a pretty, yeah, pretty neat. All right. Okay, so look, a little bit of information about the ISO 27K certification that we sort of got here. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a subject matter expert on either of those. But what I
Don't need
do
to
know.
bring me on as the subject matter expert then either.
Yeah, and over to Jerry. Thank you very much. And I'll just I'll switch my audio and my camera off for 5 minutes while Jerry
I do
talks
know
about
that
it.
this one is a certification. I
Yes.
that I do know.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I guess, from my perspective, there was a bunch of stuff sort of happening behind the scenes. I do, regularly talk with with the Finland team quite a bit. They sort of start their morning at the end of my day, so it's quite good to be able to sort of sync up with them. And there was a lot of ongoing, security elements, from a personnel perspective, right? To make sure that the company was, in compliance to be able to get that certification. But yeah, I guess if people are sort of interested, they can sort of read up on it, or they can check out the security center as well, or the trust center. Um, and now the SOC 2 report, as Jerry puts it, I think I called it a certification earlier. Yeah, but like you said, basically, it is an audit report, and it is something that is accessible, to certain security folks, if they do want to sort of take a look at that. And I do think that, that is a pretty nice thing to have that, I guess, that transparency, from our side, being that it is, that the only option for us, at least, at the moment, is that cloud, sort of uploading floor plans and survey data and stuff like that as well.
Yep.
So we're going to just talk about a couple of the benefits of, I guess, using cloud. And we'll probably move through these pretty quick, because then, Jerry, I think it'd be pretty nice to sort of show maybe a demonstration of of what our tools can do, and what I think that the everyday benefits are that I think, I feel like we just sort of take for granted, these days, at least. Um, you know, I guess on the browser side, the browsers can pretty much do like anything that desktop applications can do. When people ask, like, what browser do I need? I mean, my response is like any modern web browser. We've often got different personnel within the organization that are using, Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari. I think you use Brave, right, Jerry? So, there's a bit
Yep.
of a mix, sort of there. And then, like, I know, some customers that, they do, their preference is to just use like a Linux box. And so they'll just use like a, Linux-based browser. They don't have any real, issues or, performance or anything like that. The performance is pretty great. And I think, particularly if you looked at maybe, loading up like some legacy, either survey data or, designs or anything like that, compared to loading the equivalent up in Hermina. Hermina would would load that stuff up much quicker, and so that I don't know if UC coined the term, but like that time to results is very critical, right? Because you can place an access point, you can move to the next task very quickly versus having to wait for the spinning wheel of death or whatever the case may be, before you can move on to the next thing.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, did you want to add something on that last slide?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. I'll add some stuff here, but yeah, if you want to kind of go through this and we can talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah, look, I guess from a bonus perspective, never having to save anything. So once you've finished an action within the tool, you can more or less close that browser tab down, and that's basically you've saved it, or you just load up your you log back into Hermina again, and you'll just sort of pick up where you left off. So again, that's something that you don't have to really worry about anymore. Yeah, like project file management and file transfers and things like that, making sure they're saved in the right spot and things like that. Not really sort of a problem anymore. But native sharing as well, I find, is really neat. So we might show that last sort of in a minute. You just type in someone's email address, or you could create a team, one-time entry, and you just share it with those people pretty quick. No installation of desktop software is pretty nice, right? You literally just log into Hermina, and I've had demos with people before, and they're like, "Hey, I wouldn't mind trialing out the product, like having a full trial." And I literally just look up their account, enable it, and it's like, "Hey, if you just hit refresh, you're ready to go." Always being up to date, right? So, next time you log in, you're on the latest instance, or the latest version rather, or, you could just hit refresh, while you're working, and away you go. Did
And
I,
having it.
or did you see miss anything, on his slide there?
Yeah, there's one thing I can think of that I've that's come up a few times with customers, but I was also having some painful flashbacks with the never press save again of like situations I've been in with like local applications where like I've worked on something for hours and hours and then I go to like click the save button and it won't save. Like
Yep.
something crashed in the application, but yet it let me continue to work and would not let me save the work that I did. And there was like nothing I could do other than like quit the application and like relaunch it and lose everything that I just did. Like it was so frustrating. So yeah, it is a very pleasant experience, I would say, to not have a save button at all and just know that all the changes that I make are instantly being saved and I don't have to forget to click the save button and lose everything, not have to even think about that or have that anxiety.
Mm.
But
That
the
even
other thing I
extends
would
to the survey app as well, right? So Hermina on site,
yeah,
there's literally no save, right? It just syncs when it
thanks.
feels like it needs to
Um,
sync, right? So that fear of data loss, right? The worst thing you could have is going out to a remote site or trying to queue up travel to go out there and get everything okay with the customer and go and do a survey, and then the data gets corrupted or lost or something like that, and you've got to
yeah.
go back as a professional. Like, that really looks quite bad, right?
And it
Yeah.
always seems to happen at those times where like I'm really like under a time crunch and I'm trying to get it like this done as quickly so I don't want to keep stopping and saving, right? So I'm just trying to power through and then
Yep.
like I go to save and it crashes or somewhere before I get to the save point like it
Yeah.
crashes. Yeah, where one and that's honestly like it's hard to wrap your head around this, but like if you haven't experienced this yet with like going to the cloud in the sense of like a true cloud solution, right? In the sense of like that it's cloud first. This is a fundamental shift, right? Where there's no longer local files that you would traditionally deal with, right? Where you, even if there's a cloud component, right, where you need to go from like your laptop to like your mobile app, and there's a cloud component to synchronize it, there's still an underlying like file structure and everything there. So there's still saving that's happening. All of that goes away when you're in a proper like cloud application. If it's designed, cloud first with that kind of concept behind it. So that yeah, all those kind of legacy things like save. Remember the floppy disk save? That's such a
Yeah.
legacy thing. When you go into like the cloud side of things, there's no floppy disk save icon to click on. So yeah, it's definitely it's we're in a new era for sure. But the other thing I was going to say that I think is missing from this list that's come up time and time again talking with our users is when they're looking at the cloud, one of the things that they raise that this is a big benefit to them is that they don't need to have local admin rights to use Amina or a cloud application in general because it runs in the browser and the browser is what's getting that elevated permissions. That's
Yeah,
already taken care of. They don't have to go to their IT team or whatever to get special approval to install this application and then be able to run this application with the right permissions and all that kind of stuff. All of that is already taken care of as part of the fact that it just runs in their local browser that they already have the capability, obviously, to use. So yeah, that's another kind of thing to consider that simplifies, the onboarding process of embracing a tool like this.
yeah, I think that's a really good one as well because yeah, I have spoken to orgs before, and they do have like some certain security requirements where like a laptop or devices are locked down, and to have those security credentials, it's like, well, why do we need to do this? Browser based, yeah, it's pretty straightforward,
And I've seen all sorts
stuff.
of creative workarounds for that because it's such a problem for certain organizations to get that application installed and get that admin permission that it needs to be able to run, that they'll actually put the local application on like a sandbox type thing and then
Yep,
virtually remote desktop into that. And
yep,
then you just kill the performance of everything, right? Because you got these multiple hops and everything like that. All of that
yep,
goes away. You can run it locally on your machine in your browser. So yeah, really greatly simplifies things.
yep. I totally agree. Um, Look, I guess the other advantage that I see quite a lot, and when we talk to either customers or potential customers, is the cloud to cloud integration, right? Which we're seeing a lot more of with leading Wi-Fi vendors. They are more and more sort of moving to cloud as well. I think they're sort of seeing the advantage of that as well. Probably a little bit of overlap with some of the advantages that we've already mentioned. But yeah, some of those integrations, being able to sort of automatically deploy, projects, that you've got either from you could import sort of, real infrastructure, match that up with your simulated infrastructure, push that out for a deployment. So there's an import and export of data into and out of Hamina, and into your vendor of choice. The live analysis is the other one as well, which just ran on the video there. Maybe we'll see how we go for time to sort of show that as well. But yeah, that's probably the biggest sort of, I think, game changer in that integration space that's sort of happened for a while now, right? Like live heat mapping, live, I guess, visibility for the to the AP level, and then to drill down a tier further to the client level without having to run any client on the client itself. What's the word I'm looking for? But you know what I mean. Like the client just needs to be associated to the network, and you can sort of do some pretty neat troubleshooting. All through an API key, and a series of hidden basically API calls to the viewer's eye.
Well, and I think what makes this so important then too, when you circle back to like what we were talking about in the beginning around the security and these certification and audits and all that kind of stuff, like that really starts to emphasize the need for this kind of stuff. Because it's one thing if you're just using like a cloud application for, some simulation and, maybe you're putting a floor plan in there or something like that. There's a certain level of risk there, right? But now we're talking about integrating in with like live infrastructure, right? So I think that becomes even that much more critical to make sure any cloud application that you're now going to be linking up using APIs and things like that to talk to this other equipment has these types of security in place, this type of auditing in place, these types of certifications in place before you start connecting that kind of stuff, right? So now not only do you have the tools with that kind of security for securing your data at rest of, your floor plans and things like that, but also those API communications and any other integrations that go further beyond that. We just launched like our Orb integration this week. So there's additional data points now coming from like clients and things like that. So we've already got that security infrastructure in place at Hamina as far as having that ISO 2701 as well as the SOC 2. So you already have that framework, right? That base for that security. So now anything that we add on top of it and integrate in with is already benefiting from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then, yeah, look, I guess, having, an app, for the survey side, with the cloud, we talked about the benefits there. You can survey offline if you need to, upload to the cloud later, or if you've got backhaul at the site as you go, it's just going to sort of drip feed that information as you go. Um, we've got a couple of minutes, Jerry. Should we maybe
Yeah,
show the folks what we're talking about here? So what if
let's
we go to here?
test it.
Um, I'm going to
I've
go and
got
have a
my
look at this.
Nomad here.
Yeah. So I've got this. I call this full building hotel because this is just to sort of show off our full building sort of 3D that's in there. You can sort of see I've got a little gap there, sort of thing. But basically, if we've talked about like the native sharing built into Hamina, so I just literally click the share button here. You can see I've already got a bunch of different, teams that I've created in Hamina. But if I just type in, Jerry at hamina.com, I can send him an invite. And so, Jerry will get an email, and he can click on the email. It will take him straight into, the Hamina application in the browser. If he wants to sort of, check out the simulation side there. But the other thing that it can do is that then Jerry will have the visibility of the, FB hotel on his Hamina on-site app. And so from there, Jerry could do a site survey. And so, when you think about like, and we talk about collaboration, Jerry's, you're in Wisconsin over in the US. I'm all the way on the Gold Coast in Australia. Like we're literally on the opposite sides of the planet. But very easily type in an email address, share the project. Looks like Jerry's already got something going on his, yeah, on his survey device here. And I can tell because we've got Jerry, live updating with our survey right now. And so, I think that that's pretty neat. I guess from that native sharing, from that collaboration perspective, um, you know, pretty nice. So any of the folks here, if APAC's pretty big place. We often do need to sort of travel pretty long distances, even if you're just in Australia. But being able to quickly share a project, to another person, um, that's how that sort of works. The other nice thing here is that, like, Jerry could just be like the field engineer. Jerry could be the guy that, like, we want Jerry to be always going out on site. He's our site survey guy. So, in the Hamina sort of ecosystem of licensing and subscriptions, we could just kit Jerry out just with an on-site subscription, give him a Nomad. That's all Jerry really needs. If he doesn't want to do any of the design or anything like that, Jerry can still do reports and stuff like that on his survey data. But if Jerry never is going to do the design side of it, maybe it's all the designs are done by me. Then that means that Jerry doesn't need to have all the Hamina licensing sort of associated with his account. And I don't have to have it all associated with my account either. And then, if I wanted to, I could just quickly, I might just hit refresh here just to force, some of that survey data to pop up. But you'll see
And
here, like, now,
I did not hit save. I did
yeah, there
not
we go,
save
right? Yeah.
anything on my side.
So there we
No
go. We've
saving.
got, yeah, sorry, you're right though. Like, Jerry was. I mean, you could probably continue surveying, and all I have to do is hit, and you can see here, so he's got like I can filter this with the Anytech SSID, and this is where we've got our Survey Explorer that we sort of talked about before. So I can sort of drop him on the map there. And yeah, we've got a little bit of spectrum going there as well, which is pretty neat.
Can you find my interference source?
Well, I can see that there's something on 157 by the look of it.
Yep. I did plug in one of my interferers there while you were talking before.
Yeah,
Figured we'd
nice.
have something interesting. That is actually a really narrow band interferer too. So I wanted to see what it would look up because it looked like because we just implemented this feature now with the Survey Explorer, where you can record the spectrum data and play that back from the survey. So yeah, this is kind of crazy
Yeah.
when you think about it. So I'm over here in Wisconsin, just collected that information with my phone, and you're over in Australia analyzing this, basically in real time. Like I
Yeah.
can pinpoint where the interference source came from, what channels are being impacted, or you would be able to do that if you need to, start making recommendations or something. Like I could just be the junior person on site, just collecting the information, no idea what the information is that I'm collecting, but obviously you would, know what to do with that info. That would be a legit scenario for this. Oh, also, this is one of my favorite things to always try out, is I always try to beat the sync here. I'm going to take a picture note, take a picture of these lovely APs behind me here. Use photo, add that. You'll probably just have to refresh one more time to pull in that note now. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's see how long it takes for it to get from Wisconsin over to Australia. Because normally when I do it just from my phone to like my
Oh, there we
laptop, like
go.
the photo's already there before I can even get to it.
Yeah.
Oh,
There we
yeah,
go.
made it all the way to Australia that
Yeah.
quickly. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, I and again, like you said, there's no real sort of saving there. So, if I wanted to, I can go back to my Cisco Live project. I didn't have to save it, and then I can just go back to my hotel and the data is all there. Like I don't have to, we don't really have to worry about that. So I think that that's pretty neat. Um,
Notice the little
yeah.
warning on the bottom there. It was saying not enough data yet. So I've got some more work to do of collecting some more data. But what that's looking for is can we identify the attenuation of the environment from
Yeah.
that survey data, right? So that's another new feature that we've added recently that's pretty cool. Of if you're going to do all the work of surveying an environment, why not use that data to not only identify like where gaps are in coverage, but also to learn the environment? It's crazy to
Yeah.
think about, but yeah, that Wi-Fi data can tell us so much information, not just about, connectivity, but about the attenuation of the walls and the objects and how that signal is propagating through that space. So we can actually calibrate that simulation using that survey data, which I think is pretty wild.
That's the simulation prediction mode down here. So yeah, if Jerry, he did a few more surveys, we would have environmental learning survey, and this also ties in with the live prediction mode as well, right? So if you've sort of got your API integration with your vendor of choice, you've got your design data and you've got your survey data, you can do some pretty neat, I guess sandbox type maybe remediation or maybe like, what happens if I, change this AP model to this AP here, things like that as well. So there's some pretty advanced stuff there as well. Um, yeah, so look, I guess if you are in the market for tools, Wi-Fi tools in particular, what are we looking for? I guess cloud connectivity. Is that something that you're looking for? Now, for some, that just may not be on the cards at all, right? And so they may need something that's sort of on-prem. I guess we'll just say watch this space. But then, I think we've done a pretty good job, at least, of trying to highlight, the SOC 2 and the ISO 27K on the compliance side as well. And I guess for us, we do have separate, EU and US clouds, for GDPR and US law and compliance. We will soon have I think, Q1 next year, we are aiming to have an APAC instance, which will probably be Australia based. and then we'll sort of see how that goes and what else we sort of need to do there as well. So that'll be probably good for some of the folks that are on today. Um, and then, with the vendor integration side, I mean, we've got we do have like DNAT Catalyst, Meraki, Juniper, Ariba HPE, Ruckus, um, Arista, Extreme. Am I missing any? I think
Mm,
that's I think that's all of them.
I think that's the current, yeah, setup. I think we
Yeah,
might have had it.
yeah.
Yep. But
Um,
yeah, more to come, I would say as well. This is still a beta feature, the live integration. So yeah,
yep.
a lot of vendors will be added if there's one that you use that's not in the live yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, So yeah, and then I guess look, there might be some like no cloud at all sort of options there. I would imagine that the cost there might be pretty high, and at least for some of those legacy products, the cost is generally pretty high as well. Um, I guess, and then this is probably more in UC's wheelhouse, on the future trends side. I wouldn't be surprised if others sort of start to copy, at least what we've done on the SOC 2 and the ISO 27K side of things, to be perfectly honest. And I do think that AI is probably going to sort of increase. If you sort of think about like what we've actually implemented just this year alone, a lot of the AI bits and pieces there, the automatic scaling, scoping, the wall drawing, the attenuation objects. That's all been, that's sort of accelerated pretty quickly, and so I think that that's going to increase, as time goes on as well.
So bonus, during the little survey demo, I had an interferer that showed up in the spectrum results in 5 gigahertz. Does anybody know what this guy is? This is a legitimate device that you might see. Any guesses from the audience of what this thing is? Does it look familiar to anybody? Seen this in any environments? Usually would be in this kind of orientation, pretty high up in the air.
I'm going to guess because it's a little bit hard to see. I've seen variations of these, but I'm guessing that it's some sort of a motion sensor because that's
Yep.
usually what those things are. I got a couple of yeah, I got a
Yeah,
couple
this would
of
be for like a lighting system.
yeah, there's a much
So
smaller one here, but yeah,
yeah,
they are
yeah, this is
DC USB.
this is often used in like a warehouse type environment. Yeah, for like building automation of like turning off the lights, if nobody's working in that part of the building. But yeah, it's a motion sensor that uses like a radar technology that operates in 5 gigahertz. So it's a very narrow signal, but it's fairly high power. And when you think about it, if they're put up on the ceiling where the lights are, where the APs, often in that same kind of area. So yeah, it could be not always is it right in the same frequency space as your Wi-Fi APs, but it potentially could be. So yeah, this is definitely a legitimate. Yeah, you can see there right on channel
Yeah,
157. So if that was the case, and if you have a bunch of these, they could be slightly off from each other, where it could be knocking out multiple channels in that 5 gigahertz spectrum. So yeah, in this case, if that was what I saw in the spectrum, that would be a good enough reason for me to say, hey, we're not going to use channel 157 in this part of the building. We're
yep,
going to take that out of our channel plan and not even let our APs try to use that channel.
yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's got a pretty high duty cycle there too. So I think I think you'd have some problems if you had an AP trying to broadcast on that same frequency.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Um, well, look, we might sort of finish it there. We are at the top of the hour anyway. So look, appreciate Jerry. I know it's late for you. You sort of kept me on track, which is good. So yeah, appreciate that and your time and your sort of input there. That's been really really good. For anyone that is still on the webinar, if you want, you can contact me. My details are there. Ping me on LinkedIn if you want as well. But yeah, otherwise, thanks for joining.